I'm really delighted to introduce to you the author of this fantastic book, Debbie Roberts, who also is the author of Mission Science, which is our primary inquiry-based series. So I think we have a small but obviously very sophisticated and interested group of people with us today. So please use the chat, ask Debbie any questions as we go through. At the end of the presentation, you will receive the slides, a certificate, and the opportunity to watch this again. So perhaps we should just start practicing in the, good morning, John, maybe say where you are, and I'm going to hand over to Debbie. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Amanda. Good morning, everyone. So, hi, John. Nice for you to put a comment in the chat box, the first one of the day. I do love doing these Caribbean webinars because you're usually so interactive and it makes such a fantastic change. From Trinidad. How nice. Well, I wish I was there, but this is the best we've got for now. So let's make the most of it. So, we will be looking at I can't see my PowerPoint there, Amanda. I've just noticed. So we will work through the PowerPoint shortly. There we are. Thank you very much. So good morning to you all and welcome. Yeah, I do like some interaction. So please feel free to write any comments, any questions, anything at all in the chat box, and I'm more than happy to stop and answer your questions. So if you see me going like that, I'm not falling asleep. I'm just reading the information in the chat box because it's really important to me. And if you've ever been to any of my face-to-face sessions, I have done quite a few out in the Caribbean over the years. You'll know that I really like the interaction. I really like working with you people and sharing your amazing good practice. So I'm really proud and happy to be with you this morning and to really unpick the Discover Science books and explain to you why I developed some of the features and why some of the information is in there. So let's have a look at what our objectives are. We're wanting to build on the foundations for forms 1 to 3. It's a really important and crucial time in a student's education, and so we were very keen to provide some information and some resources that would support teachers and students at this stage in their education. We will look at some of the features and really analyse why they're there in the Discover Science books and how you as teachers and educators can use them, and any stakeholder parents as well. We'll be using the Discover books effectively to prepare for CSEC exam success, and this was very important. During the planning stages, we really wanted to produce a resource that would support the transgression and the movement towards the CSEC examinations and the best success, the best opportunities we could possibly provide to these students. And so CSEC is very heavily in mind as we planned this. And as you work through the resources, I hope you'll recognise the areas where we've really tried to address the CSEC structures, the CSEC expectations of students. So how can this resource, how can these books prepare the students for these examinations, these assessments? Well, these books were specifically written for you. In the beginning, I spent a lot of time really studying and analysing the curricula of all the islands. So I wanted to try to find something that was generic that all of you could use. So it's written specifically for you. It's not taken from anywhere else. We haven't used any other resources. We haven't amended things to fit your examination, to fit the CSEC examinations. We've written it specifically for you around CSEC. So We've also in the past written revision guides, and so these books now feed into the revision guides also. So in effect, you've got mission science, which prepares our children at primary level, through to lower secondary. We've got all the resources in mission science, and they're focused specifically very, very strongly on inquiry-based learning and skills, promotion of skills and the learning of skills. We've then got the Discover Science books, which build on mission science. You don't have to have studied mission science, let me just be clear on that, but it does build very well. And students and teachers should be very familiar with the layout and the ethos of Discover Science if you use mission. You've also then got the revision guides that also support the Discover books. So we've got a nice package there. So what comes next? Well, here we are. I'm very, very, very proud of these. I have over 100 publications now, and I can tell you that these are I am more proud of these than anything that I've ever authored or ever worked on. These are the pinnacle of my career, because I was allowed to design them, to think about them, to design the structure of the book, the features that would be included. And so I've been very privileged to produce something that is particularly for you. And after working out in the Caribbean and talking to teachers and parents and students, I feel that I've been able to produce something with the publishers and the fantastic team of editors that is specifically for you. And I hope you will be as excited as I am about these. I'm so proud of them. They look fantastic. So we've got for grade 1, 2 and 3. We've got also supporting workbooks, which have lots of different opportunities, which we'll unpick further shortly. And we've also got online teacher guide resources. So they just give like alternative ideas, explain sometimes why that particular investigation or project is included, and to give an alternative if you haven't got the resources or the students are not ready for certain things. So it expands learning, it also supports learning, and it also gives lots of alternatives as well. So as a package, there's a lot of resources there and a lot of different ideas. So there we are, we've got the workbook, the student book, and then the online comprehensive teacher guides. So that's what they'll look like. They're sort of hot off the press, and yeah, they support each other, they work together, they're designed to be used in conjunction as a whole package. But students could just work from the student book if that's all that's available. So we don't have to have the whole package, but it works better if you have. So good morning to the new people that are here. It seems like everyone's from Trinidad and Tobago this morning. So I can honestly say I wish I was there, though it has stopped raining, which is a definite bonus in the UK. And it's morning to you. It's just after midday to me. So welcome everyone, and please feel free to chat away for the people who've just joined us. I really like you asking questions, adding your comments and sharing good practice. I was very keen to include this at the beginning, at the start of all of the books, because for me as a teacher, it's comforting. And students tell me it's comforting for them also. You can almost use it as a tick box. I've worked through that. And because what that allows you to do, for some reason, you might want to teach one of the bulkier sections. For in this case, section D is quite large. There are 4 pretty hefty units in there, whereas section B and section A are much smaller. So it might be that you want to move them around so that they fit into your school schedule. You might have some activities or a short term or something like that. And so it's quite flexible. This at the beginning tells us what we'll be learning, but you can then use it as a reassurance that you've covered everything that you should have covered. Because remember, it's in preparation for the CSEC examination assessments, and so we need to make sure that we've covered everything, so you can use that to make sure that you have. That's why I like these contents pages at the beginning. Got multiple uses, not only telling us what's there, but also telling us the order, making sure we've taught everything that we should have taught. At the beginning of all the books, I've chosen some sections that are directed at working scientifically and scientific skills, really. So scientific skills in the laboratory, things that will support students in becoming good scientists, because ultimately that's what we need. As a society, we need to make sure that we have people with scientific minds. We need to make sure that people have that understanding of the skills, of the content that we need in science, not just if they become scientists. And so the skills support us in other areas. For example, in some countries, if you want to be a lawyer, they like you to have a chemistry qualification because it's analytical. And so I was very keen to introduce and include this section at the beginning of all books. Okay, so this one gives you a key at the beginning. It tells you the key words, the things that you'll be learning in this section. For this one, we're looking at mass, length, scientific methods, symbols, technology, safety, SI units, and so we know what we'll be doing. On the opening pages, we have something to try and engage the students, which we do in all the units. So this particular section is all about skills learning and enquiry-based learning. I'm an enquiry-based practitioner. I'm an enquiry-based lead in this field. And so I really would find it difficult to teach and definitely to author resources that were not inquiry based, because that's just the way I teach, and it's the way that I believe is the best way for children to learn, for anyone to learn. The youngest people I've taught recently are down to about the age 2 or 3, and the oldest person I ever taught was a 72-year-old doing a master's course. So, inquiry based learning is for everyone. And teachers who tell me, no, I'm sorry, my students can't learn like that, then you need to look at why, because everyone learns better in this way. Hands-on, minds-on, engaging learning. So the pages are encouraging students to think, to apply their knowledge. But at the beginning, we always have the key vocabulary, the key words, and the objectives that will be covered throughout that unit. So the working scientifically is really important. So here we've got the scientific method we're encouraging children and students from a very young age to realise that they must work safely. So there's a safety icon, that exclamation mark, wherever it's really needed, where we want people to stand back and think for a moment. Just a second, we really need to focus on something here. We need to keep ourselves safe, and we also need to keep everyone in that room and everyone around us safe as well at the same time. So this one's all about working safely. So we've got the safety symbols. We've got a couple of activities on that page that children and students can go away and work on independently, work as a group, work as a team. Definitely not in the manner of that picture that's on that opening spread there. How not to do it. So the scientific method, how does it work? We're talking about skills, we're designing, we're hypothesizing, we're making predictions, we're collecting data, we're carrying out a safe, repeatable investigation to try to find the answer to the questions that we've got and decide if our hypotheses and our predictions are actually correct. So we end concluding and inferring, and we might then go backwards. Here's a nice little pictorial or graphic to sort of explain what I'm talking about. In inquiry-based learning, we always start with a question. So questioning is at the heart of inquiry-based learning. If that question comes from a student, that's powerful learning. If it comes from you, that encourages students to actually learn how to successfully question. But we don't always have to start there. It could be that students have been working on an investigation for some time, and so they wouldn't start with the question. They might review it and then continue their investigation. Some investigations are designed to take time. They might take weeks. They might take extended into months, because that's what science is. It's not always easy to fit that into the school calendar, the school timetable. I know that. I'm a teacher. But if we can, that's real science. It's very rare that a professional scientist would go into a room, ask a question, and find a conclusion within that hour. It might take months. A forensic scientist could repeat the same activity over and over and over again. And if you were ever in a situation where you were relying on that evidence, you'd want them to do that as well. So we're carrying out background research, we're constructing hypotheses, we're testing the hypotheses, we're using experimental equipment, we're being safe, and then we're analysing the data. In these resources, as is in mission science, we need to encourage students to be aware that things don't always go as we would expect them to go. We don't always get the outcome that we would expect to get. And what do we do with that? We repeat it. We never get things wrong, ever. Things don't go wrong in science. We just might not get the outcome that we wanted or that we were anticipating. So what do we do about that? We need students to be very comfortable to think, I'm going to check that. I'll do that again. I'll try that investigation again. Maybe I've done something wrong. We want that security and we want that confidence that we can actually do that. We can repeat. All of the investigations in everything I write allow repetition, because it's a key point of science. So you might find that a lot of the investigations use everyday products and everyday materials, because otherwise they can become very expensive and then we're very loath to repeat. I've observed many scientists doing amazing investigations. They're phenomenal. And then the children say, can we do that? No. That didn't quite go wrong. Will you repeat it, miss? Or sir? No, we'll not. And it's because they're so expensive and the materials are so rare to come across that they can't actually afford to repeat the investigation. That's okay as a once in a while demonstration, but really it's not science, and it's definitely not hands-on, and it's probably not minds-on as a result. Oh, thank you for saying that the activities are nice. So how are the topics made to relate to the students? They're all written with the students in mind. If you work through a page, you'll see that it's almost step by step to a result. Some of your students might find some things more challenging, then often that's picked up on in the workbook and it's broken down further so that students can work independently. We know that students learn more from each other than they ever will us, and so I have tried to make these resources so that students can work on them independently. And I think when you see them and you've got them in your hand, you'll realise that actually they're very, very, very the student related. They evolve around the students, and there are opportunities for you to adapt and change, which are directed in the teacher guide and, as I said, used further in the workbook. I hope that's answered your question. It's a good question. Hopefully as we work through this as well, you might see how we've tried to do that through features and things like that. So thanks for that question. I appreciate that. In this enquiry-based bit, the working like a scientist section unit, We've also incorporated measuring skills. We assume that children and students are very good at measuring, but often we find that they're not, and they do need to practice. But you'll notice that it's very grown up. The Discover Science recognises that we're no longer children at school, we're now student scientists. And so you'll notice that they are a little bit more mature, they're grown up, the expectations are higher, and it's all about the student taking ownership and being responsible. And so we have key things like this: measuring mass, measuring length, measuring volume, measuring temperature. It might be, we could have just said this is how you do it, but what I wanted to do was make it comfortable for students to think, I can't remember how to do that. Or maybe I never really did quite understand how to do that. And so we've got step by step procedures so that they can get the skills early on in that book, in that grade, so that then they can start to apply it to their science content and really have a fulfilling and engaging experience. Included the introductory pages. Again, if you're familiar with mission science, you'll realise that that's something that we've carried on into Discover Science because it was very popular and it did actually engage students. It encouraged them to ask questions. What's this all about? Why are we doing this? As a teacher, the age-old question of, why are we learning this? I don't need to know that. Why do I need to know this? Well, here, hopefully, the students will start to look and think, that's really interesting. I want to find out more about this. So that's why these are included. And there's always some kind of picture. I do apologise about that. That's my cat. She's decided that she has to get involved in every single Macmillan webinar, and hopefully that will be her only entrance, but I can't guarantee it. The joys of working from home, people. It isn't a very large cat. It's a very noisy little side table that's got a metal top, and every time she jumps on it, she's so clumsy, she hits the edge and it spins. That's what it was. So I do apologise. She will probably make another appearance shortly. So we wanted the students to have some ownership and be responsible for their own learning. And I have really tried to put images in that are familiar, that our students today will have some understanding of, or have used, or got engaged in these activities. And I took a lot of information as well from reviewers around the Caribbean, so hopefully it will make sense to the students. So you can see there it's all in line with mission science. Included the key words again, so that there are lots of reasons for this. It outlines what students should learn so they can actually look at it and think, right, okay, do I understand what that means? I'm not very sure. Yes, I do understand what that means. If they then revisit and go back, they can measure their own progress. Science, like many other subjects, can often be quite challenging and difficult, and some students switch off early as the content becomes more challenging. The idea of some of these opening pages is that the introductory pages is that students will be able to measure their own progress. So they might not actually recall what gravity means. But as they work through the unit, they go back to the opening pages, the introductory pages, and realise, wow, yes, I do actually understand that now. And so it's very encouraging and builds confidence that they are making progress, because sometimes they might not feel that they are. And because often we'll learn a topic and think, yes, that's great, I understand that, and come to something a little bit more challenging and think, oh no, I can't do this. And so it's all about getting some grasp of the reality and getting taking some responsibility in their own progress. So there is an activity in all of the opening units where students are expected to decide if they understand those words. Let me just give you a little bit of word of thing of warning though. Don't ask them to define the words before they've actually experienced them. My experiences, and there is a lot of research around this, by the way, and I'm actually doing a PhD around language and how children pick up language, so I can pass this on to you. If they define some of the words early on, they might not understand the definition, but they think that they have. So they forget about it. And what that does is it doesn't actually give them a good foundation to build on. They build on something that they don't fully understand. And so the question then is, do they fully understand the content that's built on that? So the better defining words as they experience them and to define them in their own way. I once taught a class and I gave them all, we made glossaries out of old exercise books. We didn't have much money in that school, resources were sparing. And so we just made them out of old exercise books. And as we came across key words, they actually made their own glossary and they recorded the words that they thought were important. And I was looking back through the glossary one day of a student and it said producer. So obviously we were doing about food chains. And he'd written a person who makes TV programs or movies. That proved that he didn't fully understand what a producer was in the lessons, because he would have known that definition was referring to someone in the movie or film industry, and so he didn't clearly understand what a producer was. Otherwise, he would have written his own definition. So some of the challenges, we do have words like diffusion, osmosis, they are challenging. And the thing is, you can define them, as you say, hundreds, thousands of times and still be confused and challenged by them. The idea is we have so many opportunities to experience diffusion and osmosis. We have the keywords diffusion, osmosis in every opportunity where we can promote those words and model those words. As animals, we learn through copying. We mimic. It's all about mimicry. So if you're putting across and defining those words in your everyday teaching on the pages, they are in bold, they are big, they are directing the attention of the student in different ways. They'll have different activities, investigations, where they're using those words. And the idea is that they gradually absorb and learn the definition of the word. They experience it. And so they're more able to remember and understand the true definition. So that's the idea of it. The online teacher guide is an awesome resource. And I say that because I hope no one from Macmillan's listening at the moment. But as a teacher, I was once asked by a publisher what I would use a teacher guide for. And I said, actually, I do use a teacher guide to prop open my window. And the reason I said that is because the teacher guides were like this, they were massive. Now, you know, we're experienced teachers. We know that we don't necessarily have enough time to read that resource. What I've tried to do here is, number one, it's online, so you haven't got to carry around a massive book. Number two, I've tried to keep it really, really concise. So you've only got the essential, important information. It's not waffle, waffle, waffle. You'll find that on one page, it might not have certain things that are discussed because they're not really important on that page. So I haven't done it. So I had to include that in that order on every page and just waffled, basically. There isn't any waffle. It's straight information that you can flick through and use. What's a force? A force is this. This is how you could use the science in action. Try to encourage a discussion here. You might need to find this equipment. You can then flick through that and think, I'm teaching this month. Oh gosh, I need to collect some salt. I need to get some sand from somewhere. And so you've got lots of notice, but because it's laid out like that, As a teacher, I find it really useful. You haven't got to spend all evening reading a book just so that you can deliver an investigation the following day. It's very straightforward, very simple, because I know you're too busy. It's all about saving your time. Did include some new features. Let me tell you why, because you told me to. So the people we spoke to and the people I've had the honour and the privilege of communicating with in these webinars, face-to-face in the past and hopefully in the future, you told me you wanted certain things and STEAM was one of them. You wanted your students to be able to see the point in reading something. How is this going to help me? Well, if I want to go into a technological background, this is why I need to know it. This is around science, this is around technology, engineering, expressive arts, or mathematics. Now, you might look at these and say, but that's science, technology, and maths. Oh, that's engineering and science. Yes, there will be. What I did was I just identified or highlighted some of the areas that I thought really that these activities lent themselves to closely. You'll also see that some of the investigations on a page might also be directed towards STEAM, but I haven't highlighted it because I didn't want to overwhelm that feature really. So it's where it makes sense and where it's meaningful. So you'll have an activity, and if it can be directed at STEAM, you might want to discuss that with the students. Why is this engineering? Why is this maths? How could you use this? How's this helping you? Working like a scientist, really wanted to add that even more because we want students to progress into a scientific environment. We want them to see the point and the relevance of some of the ideas. We want them to understand where this knowledge and this information has come from. It's based on the work of scientists over numbers of years. Where I can, I've found scientists from the Caribbean or scientists working in the Caribbean, and I've used these to show to students that not all scientists are in a white coat in a specific place in the world. We are all working together as scientists. Scientists is a unified global subject area, and I tried to promote that wherever I could. And I'm sure if you can find better scientists, I'm sure you will encourage your students to appreciate that also. Discussion is fundamental, so we've got lots of discussion areas for discussion. Not particularly a new feature, but one that we really need to promote. Why? To discuss something, to be able to talk about something, you have to truly understand it. To discuss something with a teacher can sometimes be a little bit scary. To put your hand up in front of a whole class and talk about science can be threatening to some children and to some adults as well, all students in fact. The idea is that it might be a discussion with a partner, with a study buddy. It might be a discussion with a small group or a team. They will be using the key vocabulary. And if you verbalise the key vocabulary, you're setting up neurological pathways. It supports your spelling of the word and it supports your understanding of the word. And again, we know that students learn more from each other than they do from anyone else because it's comfortable and it's relaxed. So you can see we've got science in action as well. So that's a statement where it kind of sums up, this is what it is, this is what it's about. So terminal velocity is about the forces being balanced. We've got a nice little bullet point underneath the title of the page that again summarises the objective. This is what happens. It's student friendly. These are directed at the student. What will I learn in this? I'm going to learn about and observe motion. Then we've got some key information, but always lots of diagrams, lots of graphs, lots of visual information so that students can start linking the visuals to the content, to the key words, to those scary words like osmosis, diffusion, terminal velocity. They are imagery so that students can make sense of it. The whole idea is that they can look at that page. They might never have come across terminal velocity before, but by linking the snappy statements, the extended text, the picture, the arrows, the diagram, they can begin to make sense of it themselves. And when they make sense of it themselves, they remember it better. Let's remember for ourselves. This is about preparing our students for examinations. So we need them to make recall as powerful as it possibly can be. So we often have a bit of text, as you can see, and then a discussion box. Again, that discussion could be with a partner, a group, or as a class. You can use those discussions how you think that they fit with your students. It's all inquiry based. It's all about the promotion and the learning of key skills. Problem solving, using that slide before, they'd use their problem solving skills, the questioning skills. They would analyze data. They would carry out research, all inquiry-based skills, all science inquiry skills. We've talked about repetition. We've talked about writing hypotheses, making predictions, collecting data, all skills. We've only looked at maybe 3 or 4 pages of one of the books, and already we've addressed all these skills on those pages. We need to encourage scientific vocabulary, to verbalize it, because we know that as you get to a certain level, you can't progress further unless you can pronounce the words correctly. I know. Unless you can spell the words. We know that there's an academic cutoff where that's essential and expected. So we're encouraging this from a really young age. Don't forget, they learn more from each other. Upsets you that when you think you've been at university for all those years and they learn from each other. There's a review at the end of every page, really, of what I have learned, where there might be 1 or 2 questions. At the end of every unit, there's an extended review. I studied lots and lots and lots of assessment papers, mostly CSEC papers, so that I could get to grips with the style of the questionings, the expectation of the questioning. So I hope you'll see that they're not just about knowledge, they're not just about recall, they're about synthesizing that knowledge, they're about adapting that knowledge to new and different areas and new content. They're expected to extend that knowledge as well, that content beyond, because that's what they're expected to do in final assessments. Lots of graphs, like you can see, this is an actual question that's been taken. It's used actually in the questioning, and it appears again at the end of the unit. Research is a key skill. We have no idea what our students will be doing in the future, none at all. Even during a pandemic, we've progressed so far massively. And so we really can't predict. We really don't know what our students will be expected to do in the workplace. And so by training them to be competent researchers, to be able to select information that's relevant and reliable, we know that they'll be able to use that to problem solve new situations that we really can't prepare them for because we don't know what they'll be. And as you can see, there's another science in action there. 2 lots of STEAM. That's in what, a quarter of a page, and we've got all those features in there that again are designed to be extremely student friendly, so that students are in control and responsible for their own learning. The investigations are clearly, you can clearly see them on a page. It's not too clear on here because it's light, but on the page it's like graph paper. So immediately the students can turn the page and know that they'll be doing an investigation. On this page, if you look, there's an end of an activity. There are 2 investigations. There is 2 discussion points. There's working like a scientist, a science in action, a what I've learned and a what I will learn. So you can see that there's a lot of snappy information. It's very rare that you'll see a long piece of text. And there is a reason for that also. Students see a long piece of text and often switch off. So we've tried to break it down so they're learning the same amount of information, but it's user student friendly. Again, nice pictures. Hopefully students will say, what's that doing on the water? What's that guy doing in, how can he be reading that? Is he on some kind of a flotation device? We hope that they will, well, that's the intention, that they'll question for themselves. As I've said, safety is extremely important and it is a key skill. If any of you work at university level, you'll know that when you look around that room, you will know the students that have had an enquiry-based education, because they'll work safely and methodically. It might be very, very loud, it might be fun, the kids might be engaged, but are they safe? And you can tell the ones that have done a lot of investigations, because it's almost second nature. They don't have to think about being safe. So we've highlighted and identified safety areas, not because we think that they're not aware or that not capable of working safely, but to identify it, to highlight it and say, don't forget, this is why. Don't hold that like that. Don't pour acid above your head. Not because they're not sensible, but just to highlight the skills so that they can develop them further. Large amounts of reading material can be intimidating. Absolutely, I believe that totally. And that's students of all ages. You know yourself, when I said about the teacher guide, if you'd have opened a huge book and there's 3 pages of information for one lesson, you know yourself as an academic that you would look at it and go, oh, your heart sinks and you're already challenged before you've even started reading it. So I'm glad you agree with me there. I've done the right thing. The workbook pages, I love the way that the keywords are upside down there, because I said, try to label it from memory. Try to label it from memory. How much have you actually remembered? How much of this diagram do you really understand? And then look at the keywords and see where you went wrong. And then look back and think, why did I not label that correctly? Why don't I understand that part of that diagram? I need to go back to page 34 and I need to read that again. I need to relearn that. Tonight I'm going to look at that book. That's the attitude we want the children. That's what we want them to come away with this with. We want them to think, I didn't quite get that. We don't want them to say, oh, I've got it wrong, I only got 3 right. We don't want any of that. We want them to think, why did I get that wrong? What can I do about that? And that's taking responsibility for their own learning. Sometimes it's about support. So there you can see a table of results. If you're looking at an investigation and you're thinking, well, I know that I've got reduced time in that lesson because the children are going off, I don't know, on some field trip or some sporting event, I know, should I not do it? Should I do a demonstration? Should I give them a table of results? Now, what's the best thing to do there? Let them do it, but support them by giving them a table of results. Support them by giving them a diagram to label rather than a diagram to draw. That's making the best of the time that you've got. If you can allow the children to have that hands-on, engaging experience, they will set up neurological pathways, they will enjoy it, so their senses will be stimulated, and guess what? They'll remember it better. When they're sat in that exam, they might think, oh, I remember that day when we went to soccer and we did that experiment and we recorded our results in that table. I remember that workbook. It's all about linking learning and memory. We're preparing them for an assessment. I'd like to say, no, we're not. We're preparing them to be scientists. But unfortunately, if they don't pass their assessments, they can't become professional scientists, can they? Because as employers, we want them to have those exam results so that we know they can work safely, efficiently. And so we have to get them through the assessment before we can make them into the successful scientists that we want them to be. So giving them these opportunities, this enquiry-based learning approach, they will recall better. That is a fact that has been researched and researched. If any of you came to my revision webinars, you'll know that I have a real deep passion for revision strategies and the way that we remember things and the way that we recall in assessments. And so enquiry-based is the way forward. They will remember better. Lots of activities. I try to put so many different kinds in. You might not be able to get through all of them. You might think some are more appropriate than others. But not only have we got all the activities in the student book, we've got even more activities in the workbook. So there's no excuse for the students not to have a hands-on, engaging experience. So you can see on that page there, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 activities, plus a research task, plus a discussion. You know, that's what we want, that engaging, that interaction, the student with the book. These are lesson plans as well, in effect. You've got an introduction, you've got a start to the lesson, you've got a where we're going next, we've got background information. Can you see that's in bullet points, so it's not intimidating? A lot of information, how we've cut it down, but at the end of the day, we need them to get the key information. How can you make that more user-friendly? Bullet points. For some reason, we seem to think that bullet points are easier to read. I guess they are, but all the information's there. And then they act on the information that they've picked up, and they use that to address the activities, which could be research activities, could be finding things out, could be measuring things, could be extending something they've done in an investigation. Very keen to include projects. Projects are a great way. Someone from Jamaica questioned how we could get children and students to actually use the information to almost synthesize it into new and different areas of learning, and projects do just that really nicely. They allow the students to use information and to use the knowledge and their understanding to create something new or to explore something that could be topical, something that could be important to them, like many teenagers. Food is a big topic. Either they need lots of calories because they're sporty, or they're battling with the body image and things like that. So it's usually something that's really important to them. It's something like the Caribbean Scientist Research Project there. The beauty of these is they can be used in blended learning, and we've all realised the absolute benefits of blended learning in not the best way, the pandemic, but we've learned a lot from it, that students actually can learn quite a lot if they're directed and guided correctly, but they don't have to be sat in front of you. So these projects can all be used in blended learning. They can be started in the classroom, or they can be and then taken home. They can be started at home and then brought back into the classroom. They could be completed completely at home or remotely from you, the teacher. They can be used independently with a study buddy, in a study group. A great way to get communication, collaboration, teamwork, project management is to get a group of students to work together on a project. They want to do well in the project. They might not have ever worked with this person before. They might not want to work with this person, but the driving goal will be to finish and complete the project, especially if you told them that it's going to be on show or there is going to be some kind of an event, a competition. Suddenly they want to get interested, they want to get involved, and they'll find themselves working with different people. This is a skill that we must make sure that our students can carry out successfully, because the chances are at some stage in their career they will be expected to lead, to teamwork with people they don't necessarily get along with, but they might realise that by working with people they don't normally work with, they share really good ideas and they blend their learning with lots of different approaches. I love the projects. I love using the projects. I've tested most of them out on the students that I work with. As I said, I'm passionate about revision. For people who have been to my revision webinars and conferences, you'll know that I always ask teachers when I'm training teachers, and I ask students when I'm training students, who taught you to revise? And generally they say, no one. We were just expected to know. I once asked that of a very, very, very big seminar of teachers, and someone right at the back stood up and said, you did. And it was a student that I taught years before, and he said that I taught him how to revise the way that worked best for him. That was one of the biggest compliments in teaching that I've ever had. But generally we don't teach revision. So I was insistent that we had a revision section at the end of every unit, and there they are. You will have a revision technique, a revision activity that's directed at the content of that unit, or you might have something completely different, or it might be something that explains what revision is and why we need to carry it out. It might be something that supports the student in saying, look, you might have only got 3 right here. Brilliant, well done. That's 3 more than you would have got right at the beginning of the unit. About confidence building. It's about resilience and being in control of your own learning. These revision strategies can be used in any subject at any level. That's the idea. By actually in the teacher notes, you'll realise that there's some information about why. So it might be the making a card sort, and you might think, well, that's such a waste of time when I can print it off and cut them out. The thing is, when they're actually making those cards, they're processing the information, and then they're getting it down on paper or card, and then they're testing it, using it, and then they might amend it, change it, adapt it, make it better. So actually, they're processing the same information over and over and over. If you give them a printed version of it, they will play with it. It does have a benefit, but it's not as beneficial as if they've actually made it themselves. If we were together now, I would say we would have an activity. I've got a card sort activity, and I would say, which is the best method of revision? Which method of revision actually supports students in becoming successful in assessments? Which one is the best? And I'd love to listen to your answers. And I love doing this with an audience of teachers. The top tip for revision is quiz. Quizzing is the most beneficial at supporting students in remembering facts and information. Quizzing is the best. If a student writes a quiz question and then is involved and engaged in the quiz, it's really the best way. But if you're asking questions or they're writing questions, it has so much benefit in recall, and it's fun, it's not challenging, and it's a great thing to do. So several times I've used quizzing just to explain to you that's why, because actually it is the best way, it is the best method of revising and remembering information. So at the end of every unit, you can see there at the end of metals and non-metals, there's an assessment, sometimes between 6 and 10 questions, depending on the question type. Obviously, you've not got all the time in the world. I do understand that. I've tried to include different types of questions that they might encounter. They might come across in the final assessments, in the final exams, so they're familiar with them, so they understand how to use the questions. It might be multi-choice, it might be a stepped approach. It doesn't always test knowledge. It often asks them to apply knowledge to new situations, to think about the properties and then decide how those properties could be best used, for example, in this case. It covers everything that they've learnt about in the units, and often uses data analysis. It expects students to use data, analyse data and apply it. It might be scientific method, scientific inquiry. So throughout the whole book, you'll find that there's a range of questioning, and it questions everything in there. You could then possibly look at the question and decide why they've got that wrong, which then informs their planning. Where do they go next? And it also informs your planning. What do you need to revisit? What do you need to redo to prepare the students the very best? You could use some of these assessments at the beginning of a topic or a unit. If you think those students have covered that in great detail, you might not have to teach the whole thing again. You could just use certain areas, certain assessments, certain investigations. You could use the resources in different ways to become a very personal learning experience. So we come to the end of that very, very high amount of information that I've just thrown at you there. And we've come to the end of that presentation. I know that you're all very, very busy people, but if anyone's got any further questions there, these are designed for the CSEC examinations, but you might see that the actual style of questioning can be used for other exam boards as well. And the content is pretty similar, actually. In fact, in most countries, in most of your islands, it's the same. It's the same information. So if you are using a different exam board, my answer to that would be, as a teacher, yes. Yes, you can actually. You can use them for other exam boards. The style of questioning and the content, you will probably find that these resources and assessments are still very, very useful. I've put loads of assessment questions in there because teachers always ask me for assessments, and they always ask me for assessment questions because you've got answers in the teacher guide. So you've got a rounded package. You can assess the students confidently. But I know how busy you are. I am a teacher at the end of the day. I do know that you haven't got all the time in the world, so I've tried to cut lots and lots of corners for you as well. So, has anyone got any questions? Thank you for the lovely compliments so far. Thank you so much for your engagement. It makes my life so much better, and so I can direct what I'm talking about to you, to what you need, and not what I think you need. So if anyone's got any questions, please type away and I will answer whatever I can in the best way that I possibly can. And I'll just put that there for you. So lots of different ways to contact, which I'm sure Amanda will expand on further. Okay, so thank you. You're more than welcome. Thank you so much for your attention, everyone, and giving up your valuable time. I enjoyed that. I hope you did.
Thank you very much, Debbie. That was just fascinating and great to see these books. Just to remind everybody, you will get a certificate, you'll get a copy of the presentation and an opportunity to watch again. Do share with your colleagues, and also we will be sending you links so you can actually have a look at the books as well. So thank you very much for your time. Thank you, Debbie, again, and have a great day, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye. Thank you.